Did you know an 89-year-old grandmother was still pulling off million-dollar jewelry heists? In 2015, Doris Payne walked into an upscale jewelry store in Atlanta, her silver hair perfectly styled. She had been stealing diamonds for over 60 years. Her method was pure psychological manipulation. She would ask to see multiple expensive pieces, creating chaos with endless questions. While sales staff scrambled to show her that emeralds, necklaces, and rings, she would slip one piece into her purse. Then she would calmly walk out, leaving confusion behind. For 6 decades, she hit stores across 5 continents, stealing millions in jewels. Her most audacious theft was a tender dino carat diamond ring worth $500,000 from Monte Carlo. She wore it right out of the store. International authorities finally connected her crimes when surveillance footage from different countries showed the same elegant woman. Her arrest revealed a criminal career spanning generations. The most successful jewel thief in history was finally caught. Did you know a teenager with a photocopier nearly brought down the entire stock market? In 1964, 17-year-old Frank Abagnale discovered something that would make him millions. He was staring at a Xerox machine when it hit him. These new photocopiers could reproduce anything, including official documents. Security in the 60s was laughably primitive. No digital verification, no computer databases to cross-check forgeries. Frank rented his own Xerox machine and got to work studying stock certificates. He spent weeks analyzing paperweights, examining watermarks under magnifying glasses, and sketching official seals by hand. His fake certificates were so convincing that banks never questioned them. He started small, but his confidence grew with each successful scam. Soon he was forging certificates worth hundreds of thousands. Then he got too bold. One massive forgery nearly crashed an entire bank's validation system. The FBI finally traced the sophisticated operation back to its source: a teenager in a rented office with nothing but a photocopier and incredible attention to detail. Did you know a man escaped from the same prison 3 times and taunted police from across the world? Ronnie Biggs was serving 30 years for the Great Train Robbery when he made his move. Just 15 months into his sentence at Wandsworth Prison, he scaled the 20-foot walls using a rope ladder. A furniture van waited outside. Within minutes, he vanished into London traffic. From there, he fled to Paris, then Australia, constantly staying one step ahead. But that wasn't enough for Biggs. He underwent plastic surgery and moved to Brazil. For decades, he sent postcards to British police, mocking their failed attempts to catch him. He recorded songs, gave interviews, and lived openly as a celebrity fugitive. The authorities couldn't touch him. Brazil had no extradition treaty. For 36 years, he remained free, becoming Britain's most wanted man. Then in 2001, something unexpected happened. Biggs voluntarily returned to Britain and walked straight back into prison. The greatest escape artist in criminal history had finally surrendered himself. Did you know one of history's most tormented philosophers uttered the most surprising final words ever recorded? Ludwig Wittgenstein spent his entire life battling severe depression and crushing isolation. He was haunted by philosophical questions that kept him awake for nights, wrestling with problems that seemed impossible to solve. His mind was a prison of endless doubt and intellectual suffering. He gave away his massive inheritance, lived in poverty, and pushed away almost everyone who tried to get close to him. Yet on his deathbed in 1951, this broken man whispered something completely unexpected. "Tell them I've had a wonderful life." The woman caring for him was stunned. Wonderful. This was the same person who had contemplated suicide countless times, but in that final moment, something shifted in his perspective. All the struggle, all the pain, all the relentless questioning suddenly transformed into meaning. He realized that a life spent seeking truth, even through suffering, was actually beautiful. Sometimes our greatest struggles become our most precious gifts. Did you know the biggest jewelry heist in British history was pulled off by a gang of pensioners? On Easter weekend 2015, CCTV cameras captured 4 elderly men casually entering the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit building in London. These weren't your typical criminals. The youngest was 60, the oldest 76. But what they lacked in youth, they made up for in experience and planning. Over 3 days, they used industrial drilling equipment to bore through 20 inches of reinforced concrete. The 7-inch hole they created was just wide enough to squeeze through into the vault below. They disabled the communal alarm system and defeated multiple security barriers with surgical precision. Security guards came within minutes of discovering them, but the crew stayed hidden until the coast was clear. When it was over, they had stolen £200 million worth of diamonds and gold. Police traced them through CCTV footage, expecting to find master criminals. Instead, they discovered a group of grandfathers who had planned the perfect heist. Age, it turned out, was the perfect disguise. Did you know a McKinsey consultant discovered that talent doesn't predict success? Angela Duckworth had everything figured out. High-paying job, prestigious career path, the American dream. But something nagged at her. Why did some people with average abilities outperform brilliant ones? She left her comfortable consulting life to teach 7th grade math in rough Philadelphia schools. There, she witnessed something that changed psychology forever. Students with lower test scores often outperformed their gifted classmates. The difference wasn't intelligence, it was something deeper. She took her theory to West Point Military Academy, where 1 in 5 cadets quit during the brutal first summer. The data was shocking. SAT scores, leadership ratings, athletic ability meant nothing. Cadets who stayed weren't the smartest or strongest. They were the grittiest. She measured 2 things, passion and perseverance for long-term goals. This combination predicted success better than any other factor. Grit, not talent, determined who would make it through the hardest challenges. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from questioning what everyone believes is true. Did you know 3 inmates actually escaped from the inescapable Alcatraz prison in 1962? Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers pulled off what experts called impossible. For 18 months, they secretly carved through concrete walls using stolen spoons and nail clippers. Every night, they chipped away at their cell walls, hiding the holes behind fake vents made from cardboard. They crafted lifelike dummy heads from soap, toilet paper, and real hair stolen from the barbershop. The decoys fooled guards during head counts while they worked. On June 11, 1962, they squeezed through ventilation shafts to reach the roof. Using raincoats sewn together, they built an inflatable raft and life vests. At midnight, they launched into the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay. Prison officials claimed they drowned, but their bodies were never found. The FBI investigated for 17 years, spending millions of dollars. Recent evidence suggests they survived. A photograph from 1975 allegedly shows the Anglin brothers alive. The case remains open today. Did you know the CIA once turned trusted doctors into torturers who destroyed innocent minds? In the 1950s, patients entered psychiatric hospitals expecting help from medical professionals they trusted. Instead, they became unwilling test subjects in MKUltra, the CIA's secret mind control program. Doctors administered massive doses of LSD without consent, sometimes for weeks straight. Patients were locked in sensory deprivation chambers, bombarded with repeated messages, and subjected to brutal electric shock treatments. The goal was simple: completely erase a person's identity and rebuild them from scratch. Dr. Ewan Cameron at Montreal's Allen Memorial Institute was among the worst offenders. He reduced functioning adults to the mental state of infants, unable to recognize their own families. One victim, Linda McDonald, lost 26 years of memories and had to relearn how to walk and talk. The program lasted over 2 decades, destroying hundreds of lives in the name of national security. When exposed, the CIA destroyed most records, leaving victims without proof of their suffering. Medical trust was shattered forever. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Spartacus, the slave who became Rome's worst nightmare. First, he was literally trained to kill other gladiators for crowd entertainment, but instead turned those deadly skills against his masters. Second, what started as 70 escaped slaves somehow defeated multiple Roman legions in open battle. Trained soldiers with proper weapons and armor, crushed by former slaves using stolen gear in pure rage. Third, his rebellion grew so massive that 120,000 followers joined his cause. That's bigger than most Roman cities, all united against the empire. Fourth, he could have escaped to freedom multiple times, but chose to march directly on Rome itself. He wanted to destroy the system, not just run from it. Fifth, Rome's revenge was beyond brutal. 6,000 of his captured followers were crucified along the Appian Way. Their bodies hung rotting for months as a warning. The road to Rome lined with crosses stretching for miles. That's how terrified Rome was of one escaped slave. Did you know FBI profilers solved one of America's most terrifying serial killer cases before they even knew who the killer was? In 1973, agents at Quantico stared at horrific crime scene photos showing decapitated victims across California. No suspects, no witnesses, just brutal evidence of a methodical killer. The Behavioral Analysis Unit began building a psychological profile from scratch. They determined the killer was highly intelligent, physically imposing, and had severe mother issues. someone who felt powerless but craved control over life and death. The profile pointed to a giant of a man with genius-level intelligence and deep psychological trauma. Then they found Edmund Kemper, 6 feet 9 inches tall with an IQ of 145. He recorded his mother's voice to relive their arguments and spoke calmly with psychiatrists about his crimes. On April 23, 1973, Kemper called police from a payphone to confess. Every single detail of the FBI's psychological profile matched perfectly. Height, intelligence, mother obsession, methodical nature. The profilers had painted an exact portrait of a killer they'd never met. Did you know criminals once used hospital equipment to pull off France's greatest bank heist? In July 1976, a group of thieves rented a small welding shop directly above the Société Générale Bank in Nice, but they weren't there to weld anything. They brought medical-grade X-ray machines and began scanning through the floor below. For 2 months, they worked like doctors examining a patient, mapping every inch of the vault. The X-rays revealed the exact location of each safe deposit box in every security system. They knew which boxes held the most cash and jewelry before they even broke in. On Bastille Day weekend, they started drilling a precise tunnel through the floor. 72 hours later, they broke through into the vault below. What they found was beyond their wildest dreams. 100 million euros in cash, gold, and diamonds waiting in the darkness. The thieves had just completed the crime of the century using nothing but patience and stolen medical equipment. What if China's only female emperor, Wu Zetian, never seized power in 690? The Tang dynasty would have crumbled under the weak male rulers who couldn't hold the empire together. Without her iron grip on power, the kingdom would have shattered into warring fragments centuries earlier. But the real consequences would have been far more devastating. Buddhism might never have flourished in China without her ruthless patronage and protection. The Silk Road trade networks would have collapsed as chaos consumed the empire. China's golden age of poetry and art would have died before it truly began. No Tang poetry, no cultural renaissance, no technological advances. The ripple effects would have changed everything. Without her brutal but effective administrative reforms, China would have remained fractured and weak. Her meritocracy system, built through political manipulation and calculated moves, created the foundation for Chinese unity. Without Wu Zetian's cunning takeover, China might never have become the unified powerhouse that shaped world history. One woman's ambitious power grab literally changed the course of civilization. Did you know thieves once stole a $5 million violin using nothing but a stun gun? In January 2014, world-renowned violinist Frank Allman walked to his car after a concert in Milwaukee. He was carrying the Lipinski Stradivarius, a 300-year-old masterpiece crafted by Antonio Stradivarius himself. Suddenly, 2 men approached him in the parking lot. They hit him with a stun gun, grabbed the irreplaceable instrument, and vanished into the night. Only 650 Stradivarius instruments exist worldwide, making this theft devastating to the music world. The FBI launched an international investigation, fearing the violin would disappear forever into private collections. Art theft experts worked around the clock, knowing time was running out. Then came the breakthrough. Agents traced the violin to a Milwaukee residence. In a dramatic raid, they found the Stradivarius completely unharmed. The thieves were arrested, and the legendary instrument returned to the concert stage. Sometimes the most priceless art survives the most brazen crimes. Did you know the US government once turned an entire farming community into a secret radiation experiment? In the 1940s, Hanford, Washington was home to peaceful apple orchards and dairy farms. Then the government arrived to build what they called a plutonium production facility. For decades, they secretly released massive amounts of radioactive material into the air and water. Farmers watched their crops wither and their livestock die, but officials insisted everything was safe. Children played in contaminated rivers while their parents drank poisoned well water. Cancer rates skyrocketed. Birth defects became common. Entire families got sick. When residents asked questions, they were told the releases were harmless steam. Internal documents later revealed scientists knew the truth all along. They deliberately used American citizens as test subjects to study radiation effects. Thousands suffered and died while the government collected data on human exposure. The Hanford site became the most contaminated place in America, all to produce plutonium for nuclear weapons no matter the human cost. Did you know one diplomatic execution triggered the most calculated mass killing in human history? In 1219, Genghis Khan sent envoys to the Khwarezmid Empire demanding tribute. The Shah not only refused, He executed the Mongol diplomat and sent back his head. That single decision doomed millions. Khan unleashed his entire army across Central Asia like a plague. City after city fell using Chinese siege engineers and revolutionary tactics. But the real horror was the policy, complete annihilation for any resistance. When they reached Urgench, the capital with 100,000 people, Khan made an example. Every single inhabitant was marked for death. Each Mongol soldier received a quota, killed 24 people. For 3 days straight, they worked it through the entire population like a business operation. No one was spared, not children, not elderly, not animals. When the killing ended, Urgench was a ghost town. This single campaign wiped out entire bloodlines and changed world demographics forever. Did you know the FBI caught America's most elusive bomber through a single grammatical mistake? For 18 years, the Unabomber terrorized the nation, killing 3 people and injuring 23 others. Then in 1995, he sent a 35,000-word manifesto to major newspapers. FBI profilers pored over every sentence, searching for psychological and linguistic clues. Forensic linguist James Fitzgerald noticed something unusual in the writing patterns. The bomber wrote, "You can't eat your cake and have it too," instead of the common phrase, "have your cake and eat it too." This rare grammatical quirk appeared in academic papers by Theodore Kaczynski. When David Kaczynski read the manifesto, he recognized his brother's distinctive writing style. The FBI descended on a remote cabin in Montana. Inside, they found bomb components, detailed journals, and the exact typewriter used for the manifesto. After nearly 2 decades of terror, one grammatical habit brought down the Unabomber. Sometimes the smallest details solve the biggest cases. Did you know the greatest art heist in history was pulled off by 2 men who knew exactly what they were stealing? On March 18, 1990, at 1:24 in the morning, 2 men in police uniforms approached the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. They convinced the night guards there was a disturbance and needed to investigate inside. Once in, they handcuffed the guards and began their work. For 81 minutes, these thieves moved through the galleries with surgical precision. They walked past priceless Picassos and ignored million-dollar sculptures. Instead, they cut specific paintings from their frames, including Vermeer's The Concert and Rembrandt's The Storm in the Sea of Galilee. They knew which pieces were uninsured and how to remove them without triggering motion sensors. 13 masterpieces stolen. Total value, $500 million. 34 years later, despite a $10 million reward, not a single piece has ever been recovered. The perfect crime remains unsolved. Did you know a routine prisoner interrogation turned into one of the bloodiest uprisings in modern warfare? November 2001, Kala-e-Jhangi Fortress in Afghanistan. CIA operative Johnny Spann was questioning captured Taliban fighters. It seemed like another ordinary day of intelligence gathering. But these weren't ordinary prisoners. Without warning, one detainee lunged at Spann during questioning. Chaos erupted instantly. The prisoners had secretly coordinated their attack, seizing weapons from guards. The ancient fortress became a battlefield in seconds. Spann found himself trapped inside enemy territory, fighting for his life. What followed was a 3-day siege that shocked military commanders. Northern Alliance forces struggled to regain control as violence consumed every corner of the compound. The uprising revealed how quickly a secure facility could transform into a war zone. Spann became the first American casualty in Afghanistan, but his sacrifice exposed critical intelligence about enemy tactics. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones already in custody. Did you know Leonardo da Vinci designed a working helicopter nearly 5 centuries before anyone flew? In 1483, this Renaissance genius sketched detailed blueprints for what he called the aerial screw. The design featured a helical rotor 16 feet in diameter made from a linen and wire. His calculations for lift, rotation speed, and weight distribution were remarkably accurate. But here's where it gets incredible. His secret notebooks contained fully functional designs for tanks with rotating turrets, submarines with watertight compartments, and parachutes with precise fabric measurements. These weren't fantasy sketches. They were engineering blueprints with exact specifications. The helicopter design included a crank system requiring 4 men to generate enough rotational force. Modern engineers tested his calculations and found them nearly perfect. If Renaissance craftsmen had built his machines with available materials, they would have worked. Imagine armored vehicles rolling through medieval battlefields or flying machines soaring over Florence. One man's genius could have launched the age of flight 300 years early. Did you know thieves stole 2 million euros worth of jewelry in under 2 minutes from one of the world's most secure shopping districts? On a busy afternoon in 2019, the Tiffany & Co. store on Paris' Champs-Élysées became the scene of a brazen heist. This wasn't just any location. The Champs-Élysées is crawling with security cameras and police patrols, but that didn't stop 4 masked criminals on motorcycles. They roared up to the storefront, hammers in hand, and smashed through the reinforced glass display cases. Customers screamed and dove for cover as the thieves grabbed diamond necklaces and luxury watches. The entire robbery lasted 90 seconds. Then they vanished into Paris rush hour traffic, weaving between cars like ghosts. Police thought they'd pulled off the perfect crime until they reviewed the security footage. The cameras had captured crystal clear images of their faces during the chaos. Within 3 weeks, facial recognition technology identified all 4 suspects. Their precision timing couldn't save them from modern surveillance. Sometimes the smallest mistake brings down the biggest plans. Did you know the most powerful mob boss in America was gunned down in broad daylight on a busy Manhattan street? Paul Castellano ruled the Gambino crime family from his Staten Island mansion, believing his status made him untouchable. But John Gotti had other plans. Resentful of Castellano's leadership, Gotti secretly plotted with Sammy Gravano to eliminate the Don. They recruited 3 shooters and chose the perfect location outside Sparks Steakhouse during rush hour on December 16, 1985. The hit required precise timing and surveillance, watching Castellano's every move. At exactly 6:15 in the evening, as Christmas shoppers filled the sidewalks, Castellano stepped out of his Lincoln. 6 shots rang out. 3 gunmen opened fire in front of horrified witnesses. The head of America's most powerful crime family lay dead on the pavement. Gotti's car slowly drove past to confirm the kill. He had seized control of the Gambino family in the boldest mob hit in decades. But the FBI investigation that followed would eventually bring down the man who thought he was untouchable. Did you know one of America's most prolific killers lived as the perfect suburban dad? Richard Kuklinski seemed like any other New Jersey father in the 70s. He coached Little League, barbecued on weekends, and neighbors adored him. But behind closed doors, he was the mob's most trusted executioner. They called him the Iceman, and for good reason. He perfected the art of murder using cyanide, explosives, and his favorite trick, freezing corpses for months to hide when victims actually died. To him, killing was just business. Human lives were inventory to be managed. He ran his operation from an industrial freezer, storing bodies like a meat. When police finally discovered his warehouse of horrors, they found decomposed remains everywhere. Kuklinski confessed to over 200 murders spanning 3 decades. The most chilling part? His family never suspected a thing. Evil had been hiding behind white picket fences all along. Did you know thieves once stole $70 million without ever stepping foot inside a bank? On Monday morning, August 8, 2005, employees at Banco Central in Fortaleza, Brazil, arrived to find their vault completely empty. No broken doors, no triggered alarms, no missing security footage. The money had simply vanished into thin air. Police were baffled until they discovered something incredible. The thieves had spent 3 months digging a 655-foot tunnel from a rented house straight to the vault. They worked only during business hours when street noise covered their drilling. The underground operation was like a small city, complete with air conditioning, professional lighting, and elaborate soil disposal systems. For weeks they hauled dirt away in bags, working in complete silence. When police finally traced the tunnel route, they found something even more shocking. A handwritten note that simply read, "Thanks for the opportunity." The thieves were never caught, despite creating the most elaborate bank heist in history. They had dug longer per mile than the Great Wall of China. Did you know America's most innovative company was actually running the biggest corporate fraud in history? In 2000, Enron was worth $70 billion and seemed unstoppable. But behind the success, CEO Jeffrey Skilling was hiding massive debt using fake partnerships called special purpose entities. CFO Andrew Fastow went further, creating schemes that secretly funneled millions into his own pockets. Their accomplice was Arthur Andersen, the accounting firm that helped shred documents and manipulate earnings reports. Everything unraveled when whistleblower Sharon Watkins discovered the fraudulent partnerships. In August 2001, Skilling suddenly resigned, sensing the walls closing in. 2 months later, Enron revealed $600 million in hidden losses. The house of cards collapsed instantly. In December, the company filed for bankruptcy, wiping out $74 billion in shareholder value within weeks. 20,000 employees lost their jobs and life savings overnight. Skilling got 24 years in prison, and new laws changed corporate America forever. One lie destroyed everything. Did you know the FBI once created a fake Arab sheikh to catch corrupt politicians on camera? In 1978, Operation Abscam began with a completely fictional company called Abdul Enterprises. The FBI's master plan involved undercover agent Tony Amoroso posing as a representative for a wealthy sheikh seeking political favors. Luxury hotel suites became stages for corruption, complete with hidden cameras and briefcases stuffed with cash. Politicians arrived thinking they were meeting foreign investors willing to pay for legislative favors and casino licenses. One corrupt official led to another through their networks of influence, each greedier than the last. The moment of truth came when Senator Harrison Williams accepted $50,000 in cash, completely unaware he was being recorded. For 2 years, the web grew larger as more politicians fell into the trap. Then in 1980, the hammer fell. 6 congressmen and 1 senator were arrested simultaneously. Every bribe, every handshake, every corrupt deal captured on videotape. The convictions sent shockwaves through Congress and later inspired the movie American Hustle. Did you know society created its most dangerous monster by trying to fix a troubled child? In 1903, 11-year-old Carl Panzram was sent to a Minnesota reform school for minor theft. What happened next turned him into America's most brutal serial killer. The guards beat him daily, chained him in solitary confinement, and broke his spirit completely. He escaped multiple times, each capture making him more violent and hateful. By adulthood, Panzram had declared war on all humanity. He bought a yacht and used it as a floating murder chamber, killing over 20 men. In Africa, he shot victims and fed their bodies to crocodiles for entertainment. He documented every murder in detailed confessions, showing no remorse whatsoever. When finally caught, he told prison guard Henry Lesser about 22 murders and countless rapes. At his execution, he looked at the hangman and said, "Hurry up." The system meant to save him had created pure evil instead. Sometimes trying to fix someone only breaks them beyond repair. Did you know the most famous unsolved hijacking in history left behind crucial DNA evidence that investigators didn't test for 30 years? In 1971, a man calling himself D.B. Cooper boarded Flight 305, calmly ordered bourbon and soda, and chain-smoked cigarettes. He politely showed flight attendant Florence Schaffner his briefcase filled with dynamite, then demanded $200,000 in cash. Cooper released all 36 passengers unharmed, gave precise flying instructions to the crew, and jumped into a freezing rainstorm. He wore only a business suit and loafers. But here's the shocking part. Cooper left his black necktie behind with perfect DNA evidence. The FBI didn't test it until 2001, when advanced technology finally became available. They've since tested the DNA against hundreds of suspects and family members over decades. Not a single match. Cooper remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in American history. After 50 years, his true identity is still completely unknown. The perfect crime with perfect evidence that leads absolutely nowhere. Did you know a mob boss fooled the entire FBI by pretending to be crazy for 30 years? Vincent Gigante ran the most powerful crime family in New York, while everyone thought he was insane. In the 1950s, FBI agents watched him closely. He was sharp, calculating, dangerous. But then something strange happened. By the 1970s, the same man was wandering Greenwich Village in a bathrobe and slippers. He mumbled to himself, talked to parking meters, and drooled in public. Psychiatrists declared him mentally unfit for trial. Judges dismissed charges. Meanwhile, he was secretly ordering hits and running a criminal empire worth millions. For decades, he held conversations through hand signals and whispers while acting like a madman. The performance was flawless until 1997. FBI wiretaps finally caught him speaking clearly, planning crimes with perfect clarity. The greatest act in organized crime history was over. Genius-level deception had fooled an entire legal system for 3 decades. Did you know that in 1995, an unemployed plumber stole a 60-ton military tank and went on a rampage through San Diego? Sean Nelson's life had completely fallen apart. His plumbing business failed, his marriage crumbled, and he was drowning in debt. On May 17th, he drove to a National Guard armory and simply cut through the chain-link fence. Inside sat an M60A3 Patton tank, fully fueled and ready. Within minutes, he was crushing cars beneath 60 tons of military steel, smashing through fire hydrants and power lines. Police cars followed helplessly as he rumbled through suburban neighborhoods at 10 miles per hour. He even tried ramming into a bank, attempting to break through the vault with pure brute force. For 23 minutes, San Diego watched in disbelief as a tank destroyed everything in its path. Finally, the massive machine got stuck on a concrete highway divider. Police swarmed the tank, prying open the hatch. The confrontation ended with a single gunshot, bringing the most surreal crime spree in American history to a tragic close. Did you know one man turned Australia's beautiful wilderness into a hunting ground for innocent travelers? In the early 1990s, backpackers from around the world flocked to Australia, hitchhiking between cities as part of the adventure. They trusted locals for rides, never suspecting the danger lurking on remote highways. Ivan Mila knew exactly how to exploit this trust. He would cruise the roads near Sydney, offering rides to young international travelers heading south. His targets were always the same: vulnerable backpackers traveling alone or in pairs. Once in his car, there was no escape. Mila knew every hidden trail in Belanglo State Forest, every spot where screams couldn't be heard. He would take them deep into the wilderness, then hunt them like animals. Using guns and knives, he turned their dream trips into nightmares. When police finally found 7 bodies buried in shallow graves, the forensic evidence was horrifying. One predator had weaponized an entire forest, destroying Australia's reputation as a safe haven for young travelers forever. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Boston's Great Molasses Flood in 1919. First, a 25-foot wall of molasses raced through the streets at the 35 miles per hour. Imagine a sticky tsunami of syrup crushing everything in its path. Second, the disaster happened because of terrible construction on a 2.3 million gallon storage tank. The company cut corners using steel too thin and rivets too weak for such massive weight. Third, victims couldn't escape the deadly sweetness that trapped them. The molasses was 2 feet deep in some areas, making rescue nearly impossible. Fourth, the sticky evidence lasted for decades afterward. Molasses kept seeping through sidewalk cracks for over 30 years. The disaster was so shocking it changed building safety laws forever. Fifth, here's the most incredible part. People living in Boston's North End still claim they can smell molasses on hot summer days. Over a century later, the sweetest disaster in history refuses to be forgotten. Death by dessert ingredient sounds absurd, but it left permanent scars on an entire neighborhood. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the dancing plague of 1518. First, over 400 people in Strasbourg suddenly began dancing uncontrollably, and it killed dozens of them. It started with one woman dancing in the street, but within days, hundreds joined her. Second, victims danced for days without stopping to eat, drink, or sleep. Their feet bled through their shoes, but they couldn't stop moving. Third, authorities thought music would cure them, so they hired musicians and built stages. This made everything worse. The music drove them into an even wilder frenzy. Fourth, people collapsed mid-dance from heart attacks and strokes. The dancing spread like a disease through the city, jumping from person to person. Fifth, the most disturbing part was how it ended. Some dancers had to be physically restrained and carried to a mountaintop shrine. Only there, away from the city, did the spell finally break. Medieval medicine couldn't explain it then, and doctors still debate what caused this deadly dance fever. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the most insane scientific rivalry in history. First, paleontologists Edward Cope and Othniel Marsh literally dynamited fossil sites to keep each other from discovering dinosaur bones. Second, they turned the Wild West into their personal battlefield, bribing each other's workers with cash and whiskey to switch sides or sabotage digs. Third, they published completely fake dinosaur discoveries in scientific journals just to embarrass each other and waste their rivals' time chasing non-existent fossils. Fourth, their field teams carried guns and got into actual armed standoffs in the Badlands, turning fossil hunting into something resembling a range war. Fifth, and most shocking, they spent their entire fortunes trying to destroy each other, literally blowing up dig sites with dynamite to prevent their competitor from accessing them. Countless irreplaceable fossils were lost forever because 2 grown men couldn't share the sandbox. This wasn't science, it was warfare with shovels and explosives. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Mount Tambora's eruption that changed the world. First, this Indonesian volcano's 1815 blast created the year without a summer in 1816, causing global crop failures and widespread famine. Second, the climate chaos was so severe that New England had snow falling in July, and temperatures dropped so low that crops froze across Europe and America. Third, this volcanic winter triggered the largest cholera pandemic in human history, as desperate people migrated to contaminated water sources, spreading disease across continents. Fourth, the disaster sparked massive population movements, including pushing American settlers westward and directly contributing to the Mormon exodus as communities fled the failing harvests. Fifth, here's the most incredible part. The dark, cold summer of 1816 forced people indoors, where Mary Shelley and her friends spent their time writing ghost stories. That gloomy summer at Lake Geneva gave birth to both Frankenstein and modern vampire literature. One volcanic eruption literally created the horror genre. Did you know one German soldier may have killed over 1,000 Allied troops in a single day? Heinrich Severloh was 19 years old, manning a machine gun nest overlooking Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. When the first landing craft appeared at dawn, he began firing his MG-42 machine gun. Wave after wave of American soldiers charged across the sand, and he cut them down without stopping. For 9 straight hours, he fired over 12,000 direct fusion rounds while bodies piled up on the beach below. His gun barrel turned red hot from constant use, but he kept shooting. The Americans kept coming, and he kept killing them. By evening, the sand was stained red for hundreds of yards. Later, Severloh would be haunted by what he had done, calling it the worst day of his life. He spent decades trying to make peace with American veterans. One teenager with a machine gun had turned D-Day into a nightmare. The Beast of Omaha Beach had created one of history's most horrific killing fields. Here are 5 things you didn't know about China's lost treasure fleets that could have changed history forever. First, Zhenghi's treasure ships were absolutely massive. While Columbus sailed in the Santa Maria just 85 feet long, Chinese treasure ships stretched over 600 feet. Second, these weren't small expeditions. Columbus brought 90 men total, but Chinese fleets carried over 30,000 crew members across hundreds of ships. Third, they reached Africa 70 years before any European ever set foot there. These floating cities had multiple decks, gardens, libraries, and workshops. Fourth, China suddenly abandoned everything. In 1433, they recalled all fleets, banned ocean exploration, and burned every record of their voyages. Fifth, here's the mind-blowing part. If China had continued exploring for just 20 more years, they would have reached America decades before Columbus. Chinese explorers would have discovered Europe, not the other way around. World history would be completely reversed. China stopped exploring and handed the entire age of discovery to Europe. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the year Rome went completely insane. First, in 193 AD, the Roman Empire burned through 6 different emperors in just 12 months. Second, after murdering Emperor Pertinax, the Praetorian Guard literally auctioned off the throne to the highest bidder. They stood outside their barracks shouting offers like street vendors selling fruit. Third, a wealthy senator named Didius Julianus bought the entire Roman Empire for 25,000 sestertii per guard. He walked in, paid cash, and became ruler of 60 million people overnight. Fourth, 3 rival generals immediately declared themselves emperor and launched simultaneous civil wars across the empire. Fifth, Septimius Severus marched on Rome and had Julianus beheaded after just 66 days as emperor. This year of 5 emperors nearly collapsed the greatest empire in history. Severus had to completely rebuild the military to prevent future coups. Imagine buying absolute power like groceries, then losing your head 2 months later. Rome was one auction away from total destruction. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the Zanzibar Revolution. First, in 1964, just 600 men overthrew an entire government in under 6 hours. The Sultan of Zanzibar had ruled for decades, but his regime crumbled faster than anyone thought possible. Second, the revolutionary leader John Okello claimed divine voices commanded him to revolt. He told followers that God himself had chosen him to liberate the island. Third, they captured the radio station first and broadcast that Arab colonialism was officially over. Within hours, the entire power structure collapsed. Fourth, an estimated 17,000 Navajo-descendant Arabs and Indians were killed in the weeks that followed. The revolutionaries had prepared victim lists months in advance, targeting specific families and neighborhoods. Fifth, Okello was mysteriously exiled just weeks after his victory. His own allies feared his unpredictable violence and messianic behavior. The man who claimed divine guidance became too dangerous even for his supporters. A small group toppled a government in hours, but the ethnic violence that followed lasted much longer. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Fritz Haber, the man who literally feeds half of humanity. First, his nitrogen fixation process keeps 4 billion people alive today, through synthetic fertilizer. Before 1909, experts predicted global famine by 1950 because natural fertilizer was running out. Second, Haber figured out how to pull nitrogen straight from thin air using extreme heat and pressure. This seemed impossible. The air around us is mostly nitrogen, but plants can't use it. Third, his discovery kept Germany fighting in World War I by producing explosives from the same process. Without Haber, the war would have ended years earlier due to Germany's fertilizer shortage. Fourth, he later developed the poison gas used in trench warfare, earning him the title Father of Chemical Warfare. He won a Nobel Prize despite creating weapons that killed thousands. Fifth, without this single German chemist, half the people alive today would never have been born. One man's chemistry breakthrough both feeds and destroys humanity. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the deadliest bridge project in history. First, the Quebec Bridge killed 88 workers across 2 separate catastrophic collapses in 1907 and 1916. The same bridge project claimed lives twice, making it engineering's most deadly failure. Second, the first disaster happened when engineers ignored crucial stress warnings. 75 workers plunged 150 feet into the St. Lawrence River in just 9 seconds. The massive steel structure twisted and buckled like paper. Third, they rebuilt it with a completely new design, only to watch the central span drop into the river during installation. 13 more workers died as the enormous piece crashed down. Fourth, workers reported hearing ominous creaking sounds before both disasters, but were ordered to keep working. The experimental cantilever design had never been attempted at this massive scale. Fifth, they finally completed it in 1917 and still stands today as the world's longest cantilever bridge, built literally on the graves of 88 men who died testing the limits of engineering. Did you know there's a rare element called yttrium hidden inside every smartphone, TV, and computer screen on Earth? This obscure metal with an unpronounceable name is the secret behind something you see every day. Without yttrium, every screen would only display blue and green colors. Red would be completely impossible to reproduce. Every red pixel in LED and fluorescent displays depends entirely on yttrium compounds to create that vibrant color. This element was discovered back in 1794 in a tiny Swedish village called Ytterby. Today, 99% of the world's yttrium supply comes from Chinese mines, making it incredibly rare and valuable. Think about it. Every movie you watch, every photo you take, every video game you play, all those reds you see exist only because of this single element most people have never heard of. Modern civilization's entire visual technology depends on yttrium. Without it, our colorful digital world would be stuck in a blue-green nightmare. One rare earth element controls how billions of people see the world. Did you know a doomsday cult once turned Tokyo's subway into a chemical weapon? March 20th, 1995. Morning rush hour in Tokyo. Thousands of commuters packed into the Hibiya, Chiyoda, and Marunouchi lines. Among them were 5 men in business suits, each carrying plastic bags filled with deadly liquid sarin. Members of Aum Shinrikyo cult, following orders from their leader who believed he was starting World War III. They punctured the bags and walked away, leaving pools of colorless poison on train floors. Within minutes, passengers began convulsing and foaming at the mouth. Station workers, thinking it was a gas leak, made it worse by cleaning the liquid with water, spreading the poison everywhere. Emergency responders rushed in without protective gear, becoming victims themselves. The horror lasted hours as the nerve agents spread through ventilation systems. 14 people died. Thousands were injured. All because one man convinced his followers that mass murder would save the world. The deadliest domestic terror attack in Japan's history, carried out with plastic bags during rush hour. Did you know the most feared conqueror in history died under circumstances so mysterious they are still debated today? Attila the Hun, the scourge of God, had terrorized the Roman Empire for decades. Emperors paid him tribute just to avoid his wrath. But on his wedding night in 453, everything changed. He married a young Gothic woman named Ildiko after a massive feast filled with drinking and celebration. The next morning, servants found the mighty warrior dead in his bed. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just blood pooled around his body. His new bride was discovered cowering silently in the corner. The man who had brought Europe to its knees was gone without explanation. Was it a burst blood vessel from too much wine? Alcohol poisoning from the celebration? Or did his bride secretly assassinate him? Maybe Roman agents finally got their revenge. We'll never know for certain. But his mysterious death instantly collapsed the entire Hun Empire and changed European history forever. Did you know the world's first peace treaty was signed over 3,300 years ago and established diplomatic rules we still use today? In 1259 BCE, Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II and Hittite king Hattusili III signed history's most important document. This came after the massive Battle of Kadesh, where over 50,000 Ubinu soldiers and 6,000 Abu chariots clashed in devastating combat. Both sides claimed victory, but it was actually a brutal stalemate that left thousands dead. Instead of more bloodshed, they created something revolutionary. The treaty included mutual defense agreements, prisoner exchanges, and even arranged royal marriages to seal the alliance. What's incredible is that it survived in two versions: Egyptian hieroglyphics at Karnak Temple and Hittite cuneiform tablets found in Turkey. This ancient document was so advanced that a copy hangs in the United Nations headquarters today. The former enemies became such close allies that Hittite princesses married Egyptian pharaohs for generations. One treaty changed everything, proving diplomacy could triumph over war. Did you know drug cartels built an entire submarine fleet in the Colombian jungle? In 2010, authorities discovered a 100-foot Narco submarine hidden deep in the rainforest. This wasn't some makeshift boat. It was a sophisticated vessel with periscopes, air filtration systems, and fiberglass hulls. The Medellin cartel successors had recruited Russian submarine engineers to build these ghost ships. Each semi-submersible could carry 10 tons of cocaine on 2,000-mile journeys from Cartagena to Mexico. They traveled just beneath the surface, invisible to radar detection. Secret shipyards operated along remote river systems, churning out these underwater drug runners. DEA agents fought back with sonar technology, playing a deadly cat-and-mouse game across the Pacific. Finally, Coast Guard interceptors caught one mid-journey. 3 crew members were steering through shark-infested waters with millions in cargo. But the shocking discovery came later. Authorities found over 200 submarine construction sites throughout Colombia. Hundreds of successful cocaine deliveries had already reached American shores undetected. Did you know one man turned an entire army into prey using nothing but a hunting rifle? In 1939, the peaceful Finnish countryside was shattered when 500,000 Soviet soldiers invaded. Among the defenders was Simo Häyhä, a quiet farmer who became history's most feared sniper. They called him the White Death. For 100 days, he hunted human beings in minus 40-degree weather using only iron sights. He would bury himself in snow for hours, completely invisible, waiting for the perfect shot. When Soviet soldiers appeared, they never saw him coming. He never missed. Entire battalions refused to patrol his hunting grounds, paralyzed by fear. The Soviets sent counter-snipers, used artillery, even bombed entire forests trying to kill him. But he seemed to vanish into the winter itself, like a ghost made of snow and death. By war's end, he had over 700 confirmed kills. One man with one rifle had terrorized an entire army. The White Death had become Finland's deadliest weapon. Did you know America's first serial killer turned a hotel into an industrial murder machine? In 1893, Chicago was buzzing with World's Fair, visitors looking for luxury accommodations. Herman Webster Mudgett, calling himself H.H. Holmes, saw an opportunity. He built what appeared to be an elegant 3-story hotel just blocks from the fairgrounds. But behind the fancy facade, Holmes was creating something horrifying. He designed soundproof rooms with gas pipes hidden in the walls. The basement contained a crematorium and acid vats disguised as normal hotel equipment. Guests checked in expecting comfort, but Holmes had other plans. He would gas visitors in their sleep, then dispose of the bodies downstairs. Over 200 people vanished in his murder castle. Holmes also stole their identities for elaborate insurance fraud schemes. When police finally searched the building, they found bone fragments and personal belongings stuffed inside the walls. Holmes had turned architecture itself into a weapon, industrializing murder on an unprecedented scale. Did you know one truck driver terrorized an entire region and changed how women live forever? In 1975, the streets of Leeds and Bradford were safe. Women walked home alone after dark without fear. Then Peter Sutcliffe began his hunt. He drove through the night in his truck, selecting victims with chilling precision. His weapons were always the same: a hammer and a knife. For 5 years, he struck again and again, leaving entire communities paralyzed with terror. Women stopped going out alone. Streets emptied after sunset. He even sent letters to police, claiming God told him to kill. The authorities chased false leads while he hid in plain sight. On November 17, 1980, he attacked student Jacqueline Hill with brutal force. 2 months later, police stopped him for fake license plates. Britain's most wanted man was just another working driver. one obsessed killer had held northern England hostage for half a decade. Did you know the FBI's most wanted criminal had federal agents working as his personal hit squad? James Whitey Bulger wasn't just Boston's most feared crime boss, he owned the FBI. In the 1970s, agent John Connolly approached Bulger with a deal: become an informant, help us catch the Italian mafia. But Bulger flipped the script entirely. Instead of giving information, he started receiving it. Names of witnesses, locations of investigations, identities of rivals. For 30 years, FBI agents fed him intelligence while he eliminated anyone in his way. 19 murders, bodies buried across Massachusetts, all while under federal protection. The government paid him to be an informant while he used their information to kill. When heat got too close, the FBI warned him to run. He spent 16 years as America's most wanted fugitive. The most powerful crime boss in the country had turned law enforcement into his private army. Justice wasn't just corrupted, it was completely reversed. Did you know a friendly neighborhood dog catcher terrorized an entire city for 30 years while helping them search for himself? In the 1970s, Wichita families trusted Dennis Rader completely. He caught stray dogs, served at church, and seemed like the perfect neighbor. But behind closed doors, he was binding, torturing, and killing innocent people. Then came the letters. Detailed confessions sent directly to police and newspapers. He included photographs of his victims and drawings of his murder weapons. He called himself BTK and craved the attention. Every news story fed his ego. For decades, he guided investigators toward his own crimes, enjoying the cat and mouse game. But narcissism became his downfall. In 2005, he sent police a floppy disk. First, he asked them directly if digital files could be traced back to him. They lied and said no. The disk contained metadata linking straight to his church computer. Within days, the helpful dog catcher was in handcuffs. His own arrogance ended 30 years of terror. Did you know a doomsday cult turned morning commuters into test subjects for homemade chemical weapons? March 20th, 1995. Tokyo's subway system carried millions of people to work, just like any other Monday. But 5 cult members boarded different trains carrying plastic bags filled with liquid death. The Aum Shinrikyo cult had spent months preparing sarin gas using chemicals anyone could buy legally. Scientists with advanced degrees had weaponized everyday industrial materials in makeshift labs. At exactly 8 in the morning, they punctured the bags and walked away. The clear liquid began evaporating through subway cars packed with innocent people. Within minutes, commuters started collapsing on platforms, gasping for air as the nerve agent attacked their bodies. 13 people died that morning while thousands more were poisoned. The cult had turned ordinary kitchen-grade chemicals into weapons of mass destruction. 5 subway lines became gas chambers during rush hour. A religious group had just committed the first major chemical attack on civilians in modern history, all because they believed the world was ending. Did you know the most perfect heist in American history took 6 years to plan and 17 minutes to execute? On January 17, 1950, 11 masked men walked into the Brinks Armored Car Building in Boston's North End. This wasn't just any building. It was a fortress with multiple vaults, armed guards, and the most advanced security systems money could buy. But Tony Pino had been watching for 6 years, studying every guard rotation, every employee's schedule, every lock and key. His crew spent years creating duplicate keys and rehearsing their 17-minute operation dozens of times. On that cold January night, they entered through 5 locked doors using their copy keys. Wearing identical masks and chauffeur caps, they bound and gagged 5 employees without firing a single shot. They emptied the vault of $2.7 million, loaded the money into waiting cars, and vanished into Boston traffic. No fingerprints, no violence, no trace. For 6 years, the FBI interviewed 1,500 people and found nothing. They only cracked the case through an informant, just days before the statute of limitations expired. The perfect crime almost stayed perfect forever. Did you know the world's most famous painting simply vanished from the Louvre in 1911, launching history's greatest art theft mystery? Vincenzo Peruggia was just a humble Italian handyman doing museum maintenance, but he had access to the most valuable artwork on Earth. For 18 months, he studied security routines, planning the perfect crime. He discovered the Mona Lisa's only vulnerable moment during weekly cleaning. On August 21, 1911, he waited until the museum closed. Then he simply lifted the painting off its hooks, removed it from the frame, and walked out with it hidden under his work coat. For 2 years, the Mona Lisa lived in his cramped Paris apartment while the world mourned its loss. The police even interrogated Pablo Picasso as a suspect. Perugia believed he was patriotically returning the painting to Italy. When he tried selling it to a Florence art dealer, the dealer called authorities instead. He was arrested immediately. The painting returned triumphantly to the Louvre, but the theft had made it world famous. Sometimes the greatest crimes create their own legends. Did you know McDonald's monopoly was rigged for 12 years, stealing $24 million from customers? Jerome Jacobson was head of security for their promotion company, trusted to protect the winning game pieces. Instead, he became the mastermind of the biggest fast food fraud in history. Starting in 1989, he secretly stole nearly every major prize piece before they reached restaurants. He built a network of recruiters who found fake winners willing to split the money. Mobsters, psychics, even a Mormon family claimed prize they never earned. The FBI launched Operation Final Answer, with agents posing as McDonald's customers. For months, they recorded phone calls and watched cash exchanges through surveillance. Nobody suspected the beloved promotion was completely compromised. Then in 2001, 50 conspirators were arrested simultaneously across multiple states. McDonald's executives were stunned to learn their game had been stolen from day one. Jacobson got 3 years in prison while McDonald's paid $25 million in settlements. The scandal forever changed how promotional games operate. Trust was the real prize that got stolen. Did you know one of America's most powerful union leaders vanished in broad daylight and was never seen again? On July 30th, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa drove confidently to the Machis Red Fox restaurant in Detroit. The former Teamsters president believed he was meeting allies who would help him reclaim his throne. For decades, Hoffa had commanded respect through his connections with organized crime families. He arrived at 2 in the afternoon, expecting a simple business lunch, but his contacts never showed up. At 2:30, he called his wife, frustrated that he'd been stood up. What Hoffa didn't know was that Anthony Giacolone and the Genovese family had already decided his fate. They considered him too dangerous to live. By the time he realized something was wrong, it was too late. He was already surrounded in that parking lot. Within minutes, the most feared union boss in America had vanished forever. Despite a massive FBI investigation spanning decades and hundreds of tips, his body has never been found. The perfect crime remains unsolved. Did you know a 16-year-old kid once fooled an entire airline and flew over 250 flights for free? In 1964, Frank Abagnale Jr. walked into a Pan Am office wearing a fake pilot uniform he'd bought with a forged check. He convinced them he was a deadheading pilot who needed employee credentials. Within days, he was riding in cockpits across the world, studying aviation manuals between flights. He stayed in crew quarters, taught flight attendants safety procedures, and even conducted pre-flight briefings. All while FBI agent Carl Hanratty was hunting him across multiple countries. Frank's secret? Pure confidence and psychological manipulation. He'd walk through airports like he owned them, flashing his fake ID with a smile. For months, Hanratty stayed one step behind as Frank cashed forged checks in dozens of cities. The chase finally ended in France when authorities cornered him at a hotel. By then, he'd stolen $2.5 million through forgery alone. The twist? The FBI eventually hired him to catch other con artists. Sometimes the best defense against a master criminal is the criminal in himself. Did you know a trusted CIA officer sold out every American spy in the Soviet Union for money? Aldrich Ames was a 31-year veteran with top-secret clearance and access to the most sensitive operations. But in 1985, mounting debts and an expensive lifestyle pushed him over the edge. He made contact with Soviet handlers and began selling classified documents for $2.7 million. Using dead drops in parks and chalk marks on mailboxes, he passed intelligence while his colleagues died from his betrayal. At least 10 agents were executed because of information he provided. The FBI noticed his sudden wealth, expensive cars, and lavish spending on a government salary. In 1994, agents arrested him with a trunk full of classified documents on his way to meet Soviet handlers. The aftermath was devastating. He had compromised over 100 operations and caused immeasurable damage to U.S. intelligence. A respected counterintelligence officer had become America's most damaging spy. Did you know a man stole over $2 million from 100 banks without firing a single shot? Willie the actor Sutton turned bank robbery into theater during his 30-year crime spree from the 1920s to 50s. This skilled craftsman didn't rely on violence. He used costumes, acting, and pure confidence. Sutton spent weeks studying each target. Employee schedules, security layouts, daily routines. Then he'd create perfect disguises. Police uniforms, maintenance coveralls, security guard badges. His most audacious heist? Walking into a bank dressed as a Western Union messenger, then calmly announcing he was conducting an official inspection. The staff helped him count the money he was stealing. Another time, he posed as a window washer, spent hours cleaning glass before casually entering through an unlocked door. Even prison couldn't hold him. He escaped multiple times using the same theatrical skills. His final capture came in 1952 when police recognized his distinctive walk despite another perfect disguise. When asked why he robbed banks, Sutton gave his famous reply, "Because that's where the money is." The actor had taken his final bow. Did you know a quiet farmer became the most feared killer in military history? When the Soviet Union invaded Finland in 1939, Simo Häyhä volunteered to defend his homeland. He was just a simple man from Rautjärvi, but the frozen wilderness would become his hunting ground. They called him the White Death. For 100 days, he lay motionless in minus 40-degree temperatures, buried in snow for hours. He refused to use scopes because the reflection would give him away. Instead, he packed snow in his mouth to hide his breath and used iron sights only. The Soviets were terrified. 505 confirmed kills with a single rifle. They sent counter-snipers, artillery strikes, even air raids targeting his positions. Nothing worked. He seemed to disappear into the winter itself. On March 6, 1940, a Soviet sniper finally hit him with an explosive bullet to the face. Half his jaw was destroyed, but he survived. When asked years later how he became so deadly, he simply said practice. Did you know one man turned Australia's beautiful wilderness into a hunting ground for innocent travelers? In the early 1990s, backpackers from around the world flocked to Australia, hitchhiking between cities as part of the adventure. They trusted locals for rides, never suspecting the danger lurking on remote highways. Ivan Mila knew exactly how to exploit this trust. He would cruise the roads near Sydney, offering rides to young international travelers heading south. His targets were always the same: vulnerable backpackers traveling alone or in pairs. Once in his car, there was no escape. Mila knew every hidden trail in Belanglo State Forest, every spot where screams couldn't be heard. He would take them deep into the wilderness, then hunt them like animals. Using guns and knives, he turned their dream trips into nightmares. When police finally found 7 bodies buried in shallow graves, the forensic evidence was horrifying. One predator had weaponized an entire forest, destroying Australia's reputation as a safe haven for young travelers forever. Did you know Britain's most trusted family doctor was secretly the world's most prolific serial killer? Dr. Harold Shipman seemed like the perfect physician. Kind, caring, always making house calls to check on his elderly patients. But in 1998, police received a routine complaint about a suspicious death. An old woman had died minutes after Shipman's visit, leaving everything to him in her will. Detective Bernard Postal started digging deeper and found a terrifying pattern, patient after patient dying shortly after the good doctor's house calls. All elderly, all alone, all trusting him completely. Shipman would inject lethal doses of heroin, then calmly sign their death certificates himself. No questions asked, no investigations, just a trusted doctor doing his job. For 23 years, he targeted isolated women, gained their trust, then killed them when he needed money. The final count was staggering. Over 250 murders. He killed more people than most natural disasters, all while everyone called him their beloved family doctor.